I'll be introducing Dr. Kissinger momentarily. Let me just cite the suggestion of one of our generous sponsors this evening that everyone who writes a check for $25,000 or more will get a free pass on page 6 for the next 2 years. Only kidding, but appreciate the suggestion. No, in all seriousness, I am delighted to be able to introduce Henry Kissinger. Dr. Kissinger, it is truly one of the great honors of my life to be able to introduce you this evening. You see, for me, you will always be the Secretary of State. You may have given up that title nearly 4 decades ago, but no one before or since has exercised its authority more effectively or understood its daunting responsibilities better. And that is because you, Dr. Kissinger, possess the rarest of talent. More than anyone in modern American history, you have thought long and with deep insight about the characteristics required for leadership. You have written about the rare creative genius, the individual with a deep strategic sense who conceives of a better future and who takes his society from where it is, from its prosaic present, and in the face of immense obstacles, brings about a more promising tomorrow. Your writing brings history alive by allowing us to see the challenges faced by men like Metternich or Napoleon, and your deep sense of history and the challenge of what you some 6 decades ago termed revolutionary regimes gives your writings, whether it be on your days as Secretary of State or on contemporary affairs, unique authority. And you have earned your place in the history books with your role in the opening to China, which, by bringing China into the era of globalization, has helped foster prosperity for hundreds of millions of individuals. Let me conclude on a personal note, Dr. Kissinger. As you know, we both trace our family roots to Kleinleibstadt, a town of 500 people in Upper Bavaria, about 100 of whom at its height were Jews when our ancestors were neighbors. And here we are this evening paying tribute to a global media baron. Ladies and gentlemen, it is truly a great honor to be able to introduce Dr. Henry Kissinger.
I once introduced Lord Carrington in England with rare eloquence. And when I was finished, he said, "I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say." I also should point out, in fairness, that for a while I was both security advisor and Secretary of State. And never before, and never since have relations between the White House and the State Department been as harmonious as they were in those days. It's a great honor for me to say a few words about the Hudson Institute and about Rupert Murdoch. We live in a period of not just extraordinary complexity, but of an absence of a sense of direction. And the Hudson Institute has been dedicated to developing the concepts. And Rupert Murdoch has had the courage to stand alone on occasion in developing a set of journals in which the fundamental needs of our period are discussed systematically, and in which authors who do not share the conventional wisdom can find a place and a welcome. Never before in history have the various parts of the world been able to interact with each other. And therefore one doesn't know whether there was ever a period in which every part of the world seemed to be in upheaval simultaneously. And what makes the situation more complex is that the nature of these upheavals is not identical. In the Middle East at this moment, there are a whole series of revolutions going on simultaneously. Upheavals against the domestic structure of existing states. Upheavals between ethnic groups within existing states. Upheavals between religious groups within existing states and across state boundaries. Upheavals against the state structure that was created at the end of the First World War. And the impact of outside countries, like Russia, and to some extent Iran, if it can be treated as an outside country, each pursuing their own geostrategic objectives. And in this situation, if the United States does not exercise some degree of leadership, it is certain that the chaos will spread and will become more and more inimical to our own values. And the beginning of an American leadership has to be the destruction of ISIS. That is not the end of a policy, but it has to be the beginning of it. At the same time, China is attempting to find a definition for itself in a world in which it has never participated as part of an international system, and in which it now will emerge as one of the principal countries. And one of the challenges for our future is whether this relationship will become permanently adversarial or can lead to some degree of cooperation. But what at this moment worries me most is the condition of Europe. For hundreds of years, Europe was the principal continent shaping international relations. For hundreds of years, Europe developed concepts which have been unique to the West, namely a certain separation between the state and the religion, a certain standards of legitimacy which restrained contact between nations, and a concept of the balance of power between groups of states of comparable strength. Much of this disappeared with the end of World War II. But the worrisome aspect of the current situation is that the borders between Europe and other civilizations seem to be collapsing, and that one can see in a not too distant future a transformation of these societies which will change the fate of the world. In all of these challenges, it is essential that the United States, with its history of democracy and its commitment to world order, play a significant role. And history will not permit the United States to lead from behind. We cannot avoid answering the question of what are we trying to prevent in this world, and what are we trying to achieve? Because if we are not able to answer these questions, we will be overwhelmed by forces that are gaining tremendous dynamism. Now, I've gone into this sketch of my present concerns because it explains my admiration for Rupert Murdoch. I was in government at a time when it was not easy for people of a conservative view to be assured of a consistent hearing. And the contribution that Rupert and the Fox network are making by establishing a clear alternative point of view is absolutely essential for our future. Throughout his life, Rupert has taken charge of his life. And he has created from minimal beginnings a set of institutions that spread across the world. But he has never been satisfied with mere material success. Wherever he has been active, and above all in the United States in the last decades, he has provided a thoughtful alternative to conventional wisdom, a strong point of view, and a courageous stand in sometimes difficult situations. And so, for any of us who have served in government when these conditions did not exist, and for all of us who are aware of the challenge before us, Rupert Murdoch is an inspiration, and we owe him a great debt of gratitude. And I'd like to add another word. Of course, Rupert is an impressive man, and he has done great things, and we all owe him a great deal for what he has built. But if I may say a personal word, I like him as a human being. I like his warmth, his dedication, even his apparent diffidence in private conversations. And so I want to thank the Hudson Institute to give me this opportunity to present the Global Leadership Award to a man who means a lot to our country, to whom we owe a great deal, and who has made my life and Nancy's a much more meaningful one. So, Rupert, I don't know whether I have to hand you something.
Thank you very much. Oh, here it is. Thank you. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Before I thank you, Henry, and before delivering my modest message, I feel obliged to alert college students, progressive academics, and all other deeply sensitive souls that these words may contain phrases and ideas that challenge your prejudices. So I formally declare this room an unsafe space. I was honored when the Hudson Institute asked me to address this gathering, particularly as you, Henry, agreed to make the introduction. At the very least, I knew you'd be flattering as well as diplomatic, and very wise, everything else you said. But having been in China recently and spent some time with President Xi, it is very clear to me how much China has changed and how much Henry played a role in that change. And beyond China's borders, your insightful volumes have taught us as much on the arts of diplomacy and the profound role played by leaders and leadership, a quality in somewhat short supply today. I know I speak for everyone here, and many, many millions more in saying, for all you have done for global peace, national security, and for freedom, thank you, Henry Kissinger. Let me say a personal thank you to Kenneth Weinstein, Hudson President and CEO, and his colleagues for tonight's invitation. Founded in 1961, the creation of the visionary Herman Kahn, today Hudson boasts a double legacy. It supported technology and free markets as sources of positive transformation and prosperity. And it supplied a strong national defense. Recent tragic events have highlighted the importance of a robust military and of leadership. Leaders sense when difficult decisions must be taken. That's a rare quality in an age too often defined by narcissism. No leader will fight for values, for principles, if their government is a value-free vacuum. Moral relativism is morally wrong. For a US Secretary of State to suggest that Islamic terrorists had a rationale in slaughtering journalists is one of the low points in recent Western diplomacy. I think it's fair to say it's indicative of a very serious malaise. For America to be embarrassed by its exceptionalism is itself exceptional and absolutely unacceptable. In his great book, World Order, Henry writes, "The affirmation of America's exceptional nature must be sustained." He continued, "As the modern world's decisive articulation of the human quest for freedom, an indispensable geopolitical force for the vindication of human values, America must retain its sense of direction." So for America to have a sense of direction, two conditions are essential. A US leader must understand, be proud of, and assert the American personality. An identity crisis is not a starting point for any journey. And secondly, there must be clear goals informed by values and by realization of the extraordinary potential of its people. That second point requires that individuals celebrate their independence and ingenuity, whereas in recent years there's been too much institutionalization of grievance and victimhood. Reviving our sense of direction and celebrating America's exceptional nature, that's what I want to talk about tonight. Around our country, there's a restless desire for revival. We see it in the primary process, which apart from an interesting cast of characters, has articulated a deep distaste for the slow descent of our country. And importantly, there's a yearning outside the country for American assertiveness and engagement. As we have seen in Syria, Ukraine, and in the streets of Paris, without this country's self-confident championing of that human quest for freedom and humane values, global affairs collapse into nightmare. The policy wasteland becomes fertile territory for terror. The arc of moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, said Martin Luther King. But as shown through his own life, unless you engage in crucial issues, unless you are a powerful advocate, an activist, justice will not be done. For history to bend towards justice and liberty and human values, the United States must lead in the bending of it. I was born in Australia and am proud of my Australian provenance, but I'm now an American. And like so many naturalized citizens, they felt that I was an American before I formally became one. F. Scott Fitzgerald summed up succinctly, America is a willingness of the heart. There's a similar essential truth in the Anson's simple refrain, land of the free, home of the brave. Our idealism leads us to want freedom for all people, but that is not how our world is configured. Religious traditions that demand tolerance, love one another, have morphed into a sensibility that, for some, tolerates intolerance, while harsher theologies demand allegiance at the expense of existence itself. For the moment, let us focus on the here and now. We are all struck by the exceptional qualities of America and by the exceptional and selfless influence as America has exercised in the world. We can idly and mildly joke, but if it were not for US intervention in the Pacific, we Australians would not speak with our distinctive drawl, but in the rather polite verb endings of Japanese. So let's not be PC, but frank. There's no way that Australia alone could have defended itself during the Second World War, heroic as Australian troops were. In the 1950s, America saved the now prospering South Korea from the barbarity of Kim Il-sung. And that sacrifice and intervention provided the buffer that Japan needed to rise from the post-war ashes to be a great country and a reliable ally. One country, North Korea, is a heartless, ruthless personality that runs at the expense of its people. And the other country, South Korea, is a striving democracy, which has created companies that improved lives around the world. In the 60s and 70s, America intervened in Vietnam, an intervention that has been caricatured and distorted the days since. The left seemed to be happy for the incarceration of millions, whether in Vietnam under Ho or in China under Mao. Why agonize over inhumanity when you could blithely celebrate yourself? In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan, America stood firm against the Soviet Union, and that very resolve led to reform. It led to one Germany, not two. It allowed the Polish and the Czechs and the Slovaks to be themselves, not political proxies. It recast Europe and emancipated millions. And yet, the left still cannot find the words to recognize Ronald Reagan. The rest of the world, he changed it. In that very same era, the US provided a stable background for the rise of China, which went from the impoverishment of mindless ideology to the magic of market forces, allowing hundreds of millions of people to escape from poverty through their own efforts. The emancipation of the most populous nation on earth is a modern miracle. Yet this fundamental, irrefutable truth must be denied by those who despise America and detest economic freedom. The Chinese understand and they appreciate the undoubted efficacy of American influence. Yet the soft left cannot countenance that remarkable human success. America's contribution to life itself are many and meaningful. But from the mass production of antibiotics to the banishing of polio, the treatment of HIV, and the wonder of gene therapy, and all that means to every disease. Markets produce a messy magic. It's the magic of our collective creativity. Let's examine that word, frack. Not hundreds of millions, but billions of people will benefit from fracking and the cheaper energy it provides. And yet a comfortable elite wants to deny their fellow humans the benefits of this technology. Fracking has become a litmus test of principle. Those governments that forbid fracking are the flat earth variety, including New York State. They believe that the earth revolves around them. Even the EPA in America have been unable to undermine fracking, despite its efforts. So now EPA stands for Environmentalists Punish America. Of course, pollution must be reduced, whether in the water or air, or ever. And we must evolve to more sustainable, cleaner forms of energy. But the platform for that future, for now, is an oil and gas platform. And deny that reality is to condemn the most vulnerable to the indignity of poverty for the sake of ideology, that being the ideology of self. The triumph of the me, of the needs of the many. Henry rightly said we should tell the truth about our country, and I would challenge not to let untruths proliferate. My journey was one that began in journalism in a small city, Adelaide, but the lessons are unchanging in that people's fears, desires, needs, and hopes remain the same. Among the supposedly elite and powerful individuals I have met, you could crudely classify two classes. Those that know who they are, and those who said, "Don't you know who I am?" That we are privileged is not an issue. We are, of course. But mobility must be our moral imperative, regardless of colour or class. How can we really tolerate stratification? How can we allow self-indulgence to define outlook and opportunity? How can we, in this room, be content with poverty, intellectual or economic? And how can we be content with a world defined by ideologies of those who seek to please and appease? We're here not to apologise for America, but to celebrate America. We're here to reflect upon the world as it might have been without America, a much, much lesser world. Most importantly, we're here to reflect upon the world as it might have been without America. If only it remains infused with the energy and creativity that define America. The world as we know it now depends on this great country. Let us resolve here tonight that we will continue in the tradition of the Hudson Institute and our friend Henry Kissinger. Let us resolve that our country can depend on us. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Marie-Josee Kravis.
God, I don't know who signed me up to speak after Henry Kissinger and Rupert Murdoch, but I did want to thank both Henry and Rupert for being here this evening, and not only for providing us with a historical and political context, but also for raising the key issues that face our nation. Herman Kahn always said that the Hudson's mission was to raise the quality of the national debate. And certainly, you've provided us with an agenda that's not only challenging intellectually, but that's challenging politically and economically. but you've set a standard by which we will work and continue our research, and I want to thank you profoundly for such a stimulating intervention. I also want to thank all of you who are here this evening in support of Hudson, and thank the Hudson staff who've put this together and worked so hard to make this evening so successful. So onwards and upwards, as Herman said, our role is to try to make the desirable more probable, the undesirable less probable. And that is the task with which I leave all of you. Thank you.